Okay, hi guys, my name is Adrian Frias, or Adrian Frias. I'm currently a first-year Master's in Urban Planning student at the University of Southern California. This video here is about the Alameda Corridor, which happens to be the biggest street that I live next to since I was born. I was born here in the President Streets neighborhood in Carson, as you can see. And less than 400 feet away from me is all this. It's like this corridor that is moving 40% of the United States commerce and goods coming from other countries and also being exported outward as well through this really big track of rail that's kind of existed for over 100 years, on and off, obviously been renovated, as well as all these container trucks that pass by countless throughout the day, not just on this street but also on some of the other sub-streets on Santa Fe, Carson Street, etc. But obviously Alameda is the main corridor they take to then ultimately get to downtown, where then they are either driven across the country or put on a train as a freight and then taken across the country as well. So this is my video on the Alameda Corridor. I'll be showing you guys a little bit of the history of it and also analyzing it through a couple lenses of urban planning, from neoliberalism to logical and rational planning, as well as just a bit more historical uses on blight and things of that nature. Thank you guys so much.
To start off with Los Angeles' indigenous past, this land that the corridor now sits on, now travels through and traverses, was originally land of the Tongva people, which inhabited this land we know as Los Angeles and most of Southern California for thousands of years, hundreds of years, for certain sects and tribes of the Tongva, long before any settlers from the Spaniards to the English and any other European settlement was here. But to really start at the crux of the Alameda Corridor, we have to start with kind of the officialized things that the city named it to be. So back in 1855, the city of Los Angeles voted on February 2nd to officially name the street of Alameda, which at the time was built out going eastward, then turning southward into what now would be South Los Angeles. And then the next update was in 1869. The first locomotive railway in Southern California was the Los Angeles and San Pedro Railroad, which began operation along Alameda Street, collecting Los Angeles's core at the time to the waterfront. In 1896, one-bedroom hostels called cribs were all over Alameda Street, anywhere from when people first got off the train in Los Angeles coming from other parts of the West or parts all over the U.S. And these cribs were, homes of prostitution. So prostitutes would be there, waiting for the arrival of these men. And it was a pretty big source of commodity, which is really interesting to think that these men coming to work these industrial, hardworking, blue-collar jobs also had another motive. So that's a bit more history on the street. In the 1930s, by then Alameda was a vital corridor to the city's industrial backbone, as automobiles started coming up around this time post the Depression, and workers were coming and flocking to the West Coast as much as they could. And Alameda Street was really one of the places throughout LA County seeing that growth. As time went on in the 1930s, as we all know, redlining started to happen nationwide, and with that the home loan corporations, or Hulk, policies redlined the western side of the Alameda Corridor, with neighborhoods on that side being classified as blighted, and places where Mexicans and other minorities like Japanese or Italians lived being considered yellow or redlined. This epitomizes the concept of the segregated city, an era where the Hulk, via the power of the federal government, split Los Angeles and cities throughout the country on the basis of racist ideology.
My constituents are very happy with the final result. First of all, you have grade separation, which means you have safety for many of those young people who are going to school, for the residents who have to travel across those railroad lines. One other thing, in many instances, those train tracks divided cities and communities. By having it in a trench below grade, You brought together different communities and made them one and made it more attractive for the people who live there.
Modern day, this is prevalent as issues of environmental pollution heavily persist along the corridor, and the communities adjacent to it are disproportionately Black and Latino. Moving forward to the 1980s, that's the first time that SCAG, which is the Southern California Association of Governments, understands and sees the need for better travel along the corridor, as it had become, the massive goods movement center that we see today, but without the efficiency, without the added underpasses and trench and things we see today that kind of make the corridor what it is. As such, they established in October of 1981 the Ports Advisory Committee, PAC. The committee was established in response to the growing concerns about the ability of the ground transportation system to accommodate increasing traffic in the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles as the city grew. Throughout the 80s, they created this plan to, hopefully update the corridor, and in 1989, the Alameda Corridor Task Force under the PAC, the Port Authority Commission, agreed that a joint powers authority would be needed to create a design and construct the Alameda Corridor properly to address the growing congestion caused by trains, trucks, and cars sharing the same routes. This officially established ACTA, or the Alameda Corridor Transportation Authority, in August of 1989. Moving forward, the early 90s, there was a lot going on, especially when it came to the infrastructure that the Alameda Corridor was going to be home to one day. As such, in 1992, we know that the Los Angeles Rebellion happened during this year, where many community members uncovered and brought to light the historic redlining and pollution issues along Alameda, causing for great understanding at a pivotal time when the Alameda Corridor Environmental Impact Report, which is mandated by the state, was going up for votes and public comment. In 1993, specifically in January, it went up to votes and passed, with all these concerns being brought up and things that ultimately were spoken about in the EIR. In 1994, the Alameda Corridor was sold by the BNSF to the Port of Long Beach for $250 million. This highlights an example of what I would call city functional, as the main reason was so that government entities could update the freight corridor, as prior cities had found it to have too many at-grade crossings that resulted in issues and delays for goods movement. As such, they spent the next 7 years bettering the corridor for the freight industry via truck and rail transportation.
In the south end, freight trains carrying cargo containers travel to and from the ports through Wilmington, Rancho Dominguez, and Carson.
We have the two significant improvements in our city. One is the Del Amo Boulevard grade separation, and another one is the Sepulveda Boulevard overpass, and residents that used to have to wait long periods of time to cross those particular areas will no longer have to wait, because we have these multi-million-dollar overpasses now completed, which benefits our entire city.
Advancements didn't address all the issues. They more so addressed the other concept that I'm going to be speaking about, the neoliberal city. The fact that these goods needed to move, but what about these people that inhabit and live adjacent to the Alameda Corridor? In 1997, construction began on the Alameda Corridor, officially on that major project for an underground trench freight rail line to ease congestion, starting off with 2 lanes that then could possibly, in the future, be made into 3 lanes of rail. In 1998, as well, they initiated an initiative to limit graffiti on the corridor, which is funded to paint and use a sort of new paint technology to help paint over the graffiti throughout the walls, freights, and as well as the infrastructure on the corridor. This unfortunately didn't do much and continues to still be a prevailing issue today, as one easy drive or look across my street, you'll see that there's always, until this day still, graffiti on the Alameda Corridor, on the trailers, on the freights, and now with the addition of a new wall early last year, now on that wall that blocks and barriers the corridor from the adjacent right-of-way. And finally, in 2002, the Alameda Corridor officially opened after a total cost of over $2.1 billion. Alongside this was also the improvement of a bunch of above-grade additions, which include one right next to the site that I showed you guys earlier in the beginning of the video, which is my neighborhood, right above Delamo Boulevard as well as Carson Street, with 2 above-grade crossings for the train to go under on Alameda Street, and these above-ground bridges to then lead people along these major streets. Ultimately, nowadays in 2015, the corridor continues to act as the main critical piece of infrastructure for freight transportation between the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach to the rest of the country. As mentioned, over 40% of the country's goods come in through this port complex, making it far and away the most important in the country. And nonetheless, aiding to that concept that I mentioned before, and making it probably the utmost example in the US of a neoliberal city, one that aids capitalism. The corridor is the vast majority of goods. The corridor epitomizes the power of capital, as none of the poor and racially disadvantaged communities along the corridor see what's good. They see the goods pass by. Meanwhile, they struggle living in environmentally adverse conditions that only worsen in their health in the long run. So even though the EIR that was done almost 30 years ago state that they'd be reducing noise pollution, it's still not to a degree that would better people's lives, especially in these places adjacent to the community. Looking through the EIR, my neighborhood still has a bunch of hazardous waste sites that I drive by all the time and see constantly, and still have noise pollution that burdens and affects the elderly people in my neighborhood daily. Ultimately only helping those corporations that control the means of production, as Marx would say, in this case the goods movement industry and the rest of the country's capitalistically driven economy.
I was stuck in a dead-end job, going nowhere, and when I heard about this opportunity, I jumped on it.
It's opened a lot of doors for me.
My son, he talks about it every day. I brought him over here to take a look at what I was doing. He go back to school, tell all his friends that his mother worked for the Alameda Corridor. We get to live a little bit better due to the Alameda Corridor.
To me, it's very ironic how much of this neoliberal idea was etched into the creation of this corridor, and often is with a lot of infrastructure, like we saw with highways and we saw with this corridor. A lot of these employees were given opportunities for economic improvement and social mobility, thankfully, through these positions, working to construct this corridor at the time, but ultimately still have to suffer the consequences and these externalities of capitalism that still adhere to adverse effects. This corridor, as we saw, was even something advertised at schools as a great benefit for the community, when ultimately the harsh realities were never really spoken about and still aren't. And I still find it very ironic, the fact that these containers hold so much of the country's goods, and who knows what could be in one of them. Anything from a luxury car to stacks of paper to vanilla coming from Madagascar. One can't quite gauge what's coming in through these goods all the time, through these freights. Yet, ironically, they go and pass through LA County's most impoverished communities, anywhere from Wilmington to Long Beach and Carson, where I live, up to Compton, all the way through South Los Angeles, only to go to the rest of the country. And it's interesting to note that it starts here in LA County, with the Alameda Corridor off to 3,000-esque miles throughout the country, all the way to Maine. And is likely the place where 40% of the goods in your home, in your car, in your classroom, things that are imported, come from. So the next time you open your refrigerator or buy something at Target, buy something at Walmart, think twice on where it comes from, because it's probably passed by the Alameda Corridor.
We did it.
We did it. We did it. We did it.
Lo hicimos. We did it.
We did it.
The Alameda Corridor sets a new standard for the nation by exhibiting enviable cooperation, determination, and execution.
I think the other communities can learn that no matter how complicated a project appears on the surface, miraculous results can be accomplished.